Okay, we are back. This is episode, I think, 5 of Thinking About Christianity, and it's part 2 of The Problem of Evil. I've entitled it, If God, Why Evil? Oh, and before we go further, I got to tell you something very exciting here, a new thing we're doing, at least for this episode. I opened the shades, so we have natural light and we have artificial light. I don't know if this makes any difference. I just decided to try it. If anything, hopefully it makes me look thinner. You know, during these times of lockdown and quarantine, yes, I've put on the freshman 15. Sorry, I got to compose myself. You don't care to hear about my problems. That's not the purpose of these videos, for me to air my dirty laundry. Okay, so if you have not watched the first video about evil and suffering, please do watch it. In that video, I set the ground rules, a foundation. I lay out the context for these discussions between the intellectual problem of evil and the emotional problem of evil, okay? So that's a very important distinction. So these next few videos will be hanging out in the area of the intellectual problem of evil, okay? So with that said and done, I heard something years ago from a teacher of mine that I thought was very profound. And he simply said this. He said, in his view, now he himself was a Christian. So he was saying, as a Christian, he thinks that the existence of evil is not evidence against God's existence. He argues that it's evidence for God's existence. He claims it's in favor of God's existence that there's evil. And we're like, wait a minute, Professor, there's so many people who for centuries have been arguing that evil is evidence against God's existence. What are you talking about? And he even meant the Christian God. Well, he says, think about this. He says, let me give you an illustration. Let's take two guys, he said, Joe and Bob. Okay? Joe likes to feed starving children. He thinks that's good, that's right. And Bob likes to beat starving children. He thinks beating starving children is good and right. When we look at Joe and Bob, we easily can figure out that Joe is more moral than Bob, at least on this issue. But he says, think about it. When we compare two people or two cultures and we argue that one is better, morally speaking, than the other, we're comparing both of them to some third thing, some standard that exists apart from Joe and Bob, by which we use to judge the rightness or wrongness of Joe and Bob. And then my teacher went on to explain, he goes, where does that standard come from? It can't be invented by humans, because now we're just coming back to it's a matter of a human opinion. You know, whose opinion is better than another? He says it makes more sense. Okay? Now, he didn't use this as an airtight proof, but again, we're just trying to make sense of reality here. He says it makes more sense to say that the standard exists outside of humans, and it's a standard of goodness itself. You know, Plato, if you're into Plato at all, he referred to it as the form of the good. But in Christianity, what Plato referred to as the good, Christianity says the good is God himself. God's nature, God's character is necessarily good and loving and holy and perfect. He himself, in the Christian worldview, God himself is the source and standard of goodness. And because that God exists, we can look at different human behavior, different human actions, and say, wait a minute, one of them conforms to God's nature and character and even commands more than the other. Even with people who are not religious, even with people who are not Christian, we can do the same thing, okay? Let's say Joe and Bob are not religious. We can look at them and say, Joe's better. And so in the Christian worldview, the reason why we're able to say that there is real morality, that there is real good and real bad, is evidence of God's existence. Because the idea is this: if there is no God, if there is no transcendent standard of right and wrong, then it comes down to a matter of human opinion. What you like or what someone else likes. Who's to say which is better? And if we say that, we know that what's better is that what helps our species to survive. But if we come with that type of response, we're just pushing the question one step back. Why is surviving better than not surviving? And now we're back to some third thing by which we're comparing our species surviving is morally better than our species not surviving. Okay? So much more can be said about this, but I just wanted to offer that as food for thought. That if there is no God, as Dostoevsky is attributed to saying, if there is no God, then everything is permitted because there is no outside transcendent standard of what is good. And as we go on, God is also the source and standard of truth and beauty as well. But that's another discussion. So thank you and see you next time.